Continuing with our Justice Thursday conversation, this time let's now go into constitutionalism, right? And one of the foremost constitutional minds in this country is our next guest in the studio, Professor KIVUTHA KIBWANA. Good morning, Prof.
Good morning. Good morning.
Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Asante.
Hiyo shati, Prof.
Yes.
Hey, City.
Baba, leo nimewezwa
Kabisa?
Nimewezwa bwana. Hata sina la kusema.
No, he's matching you very well.
Asante. I'm going to ask mali alipata. Mimi pia nataka shati.
Ni kwa fundi tu wa mtaani.
Bas, utanieleza kule naweza kumpata huo fundi wa mtaani.
Huyo fundi. He's done a good job.
Yes.
Good to see you, Prof.
Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Asante, nashukuru.
We are going to talk about very many things, of course. You understand our constitution front to back and back to front. You participated in pushing for this new constitution. You participated in writing the constitution and reviewing everything that was being put in the constitution and also implementing the constitution. So we have a good person with us in the studio. To welcome you, CT has the day's proverb. As you know, CT brings us proverbs from one African country every week and different proverbs per day. This week, the proverbs are from the Republic of Kenya. I'm sure you know that country. They are in Kiswahili. He's going to give you the proverb in Kiswahili and you tell us what your interpretation of it is. But first, you'll translate it to English.
This is a proverb that is actually very constitutional and it blends very well with chapter 1 of our constitution. Let me state the proverb. Hata matumbo ni nyama.
Hata matumbo ni nyama.
Yes.
Okay.
Constitutionally.
Yes, it does.
Okay, that's a tough one. So, matumbo in English is what? Tribe.
Yes.
It's also meat.
Yes.
Hata mkia ni nyama.
Yes.
True. So, so that proverb means that, as far as I'm concerned,
Yes.
that when you are in a country and you are able to like whatever it is that you get in your country, it is something that you should appreciate, and so that you have the rights, but the country continues on well. If you're working and you have a job, you don't say that this job is a small job. You do it to the best of your ability. So really it is, don't minimize anything. You should always be appreciative of what you access, what you get. But it's an interesting proverb.
Now, when the Prof puts it that way, now it becomes a proverb.
That becomes a proverb. Prof, before you came here, these naysayers had told me categorically,
Yes.
CT, this is not a proverb. I said, okay, if you say so.
Yes.
But you put it very well, thank you.
It might be a folk proverb.
Yes.
A recent one.
But thank you very much. Yes.
It's a modern proverb.
Yes.
With modern wahenga.
Yes.
City Muga. Prof,
Yes.
a lot's been happening in the country recently. And in fact, the conversation we were having before you came in was with the Vice President of the Law Society of Kenya. And the LSK is rallying lawyers to come out tomorrow in a demonstration against what they say is statements by the president and actions by the executive which seem to be undermining the independence of the judiciary and painting the judiciary in a bad light. And we asked you to join us so that we can have a conversation about what the Constitution says about these three arms of government that then form one unit called government and how they should relate. Interdependence, independence, interdependence. From where you sit, is there an affront on the judiciary by the executive?
I think one of the things that has been stated in the public domain by very many stakeholders is the executive cannot say that I will pick and choose what court orders to obey, because it means that when that happens, the judiciary is undermined. And the truth of the matter is the three arms of government, according to democratic theory, according to our constitution, the three arms of government are separate, although, of course, they must work in unison. In terms of they have different powers. Like if it is the legislature will make the laws that facilitate whatever government is to do. And it will oversight. It will represent people. And it will make a budget. It must approve a budget. So when that happens, then the relay is now taken to the executive so that the executive can implement the programs that through the manifesto of the ruling party have been agreed on and translated also into government programs and projects through people's public participation, through people saying, yes, we accept this is what we want from the ruling party. And of course, the executive will be in charge of foreign policy so that it is our face to the outside world and it converses with the outside world on our behalf. Now, when there are disputes, then the judiciary comes in. And this can be disputes, citizen, interstate citizen. It might be, government and citizen. It might be private sector or actors, whatever nature of disputes there are. And those disputes are resolved by the judiciary. And nobody else has the capacity to resolve disputes unless a law says that if like some tribunals do that. And it is the responsibility of the executive to enforce court judgments. Because after the judiciary says that this is the decision, it has to be obeyed. And if there is any person who does not want to obey, then it is up to the executive to enforce decisions, and even the judiciary itself as enforcement mechanisms. Like they can take you to prison if you are not paying, some fine and so on. So this analogy of separation of powers, of course, interdependence, one can almost say that the analogy of the Trinity in the Christian faith. The three of them are equal and they are one. But there is a Father and there is a Son and there is the Holy Spirit. So they have to work together. And therefore, if you try to do what someone else is supposed to do, then that is not constitutional. And this is the struggle that we are having. In the instance where the president says that there are certain court rulings that he may not want to follow. And of course, one asks because during his campaign, he was very eloquent in terms of the rule of law, in terms of the judiciary fund, in terms of appointing judges which had not been appointed by the former president. And so those were very many signals. And talking to many lawyers, they were really happy. They were saying, okay, now maybe this is the rule of law that we are going to experience. So this reversal is definitely worrying.
It's catching many by surprise.
Precisely, it's touching many by surprise, and it's kind of almost taking us back to those one-party days when the Constitution was really, the Independence Constitution was changed so many times so that even the president appointed the judges. When he didn't like their decisions, he got them out. He appointed some which did what they wanted. And so, yes, one should be worried that the executive is, for example, going into parliament. And in the parliament, even members of the opposition who, by law, are not supposed to leave their parties unless they resign. And somehow they are made to kind of sing the song of the executive.
So, Prof, are we saying then, when we look at interdependence and independence, and we look at these three arms of government, which you say are supposed to work together, would you then say that there is either a lack of understanding in how those roles should play out, or is there a thinking that as the executive that you are the blue-eyed boy of government and that you can do what you want regardless of what the law, the Constitution, says?
Yes, I don't think it's a lack of understanding, because the players that are sitting on the political table are seasoned people. They were part of, in many ways, writing the Constitution. And so one cannot say that they are innocently doing things that the Constitution says should not be done. I think, of course, I feel a frustration. I feel a frustration like when the president wants certain things to be done very fast. And maybe some of the people who are helping him to design them do not follow the procedures and do not follow the Constitution, do not follow procurement law and all that, public participation law and all that. So when now it's the moment to kind of implement and demonstrate that some things are happening, then when people go to court, as they should, because they have a right to do that, then the court says there are some steps which have been bypassed. Therefore, go back and do it the correct way. So I can feel that frustration. But I don't think that it's because there isn't an understanding of what needs to be done. Somebody like poor Omtata, I don't think he has money to bribe anybody. When I look at him, I can think that I see somebody who doesn't have a lot of money. So the things that he does, even going to, chain himself sometimes, the police station and so on, I don't think that judges are acting because somebody is bribing like Omtata and so on. Maybe that's not really it, but it's just a question of a country wanting to mature so that we incrementally implement the Constitution, because that is actually one of the central problems in the country, that we pay lip service to the rule of law, we pay lip service to constitutionalism, we pay lip service to implementing the Constitution. And of course, there are many people who didn't even want this current Constitution and they opposed it. So I don't think that, therefore, as we have asked, it's a question of people not knowing the right thing to do. But it's like this idea in Africa, it's big man syndrome, because they had very many women at the top in the countries, maybe Tanzania. They are beginning to say that we have no electricity and, we talk a lot of English and all that. So that big man syndrome of I must have my way, and I am the one who was elected by the majority of the people. The judiciary is appointed. The legislature, MPs have been only elected by a constituency, senators maybe by a county, women rep by a county. So there is that thinking, but I believe we need to get out of that, because when we want to grow our democracy, one basic thing that really requires to be understood by the political class, by all of us, is institutions are critical. If you first of all do not accept their roles, if you don't encroach on their roles, and whatever it is that this system that was constructed of the Constitution, this negotiated system, whatever it says should happen, if that is allowed to happen, like countries, Singapore, what they did and so on, that example is given a lot of time, then we are in a good place.
Let me ask you, Prof, you're an academic, you're a rights defender, you're also a politician. The president has attempted to explain his statements using politics and saying, look, I was elected by a majority of Kenyans.
Sure.
Because I sold something to them.
Sure.
And I told them that if you elect me, I'm going to do this. And when I'm trying to implement that, there are other people who are playing politics and using the one instrument or one arm of government to frustrate this move that I'm making so that I can fulfill my promise. And he's saying that he reads political maneuvers where people are going with flimsy applications before court, and then they're finding judges who are rather too happy or too quick to put orders to stop the progress of this program of his. Is there merit in what he's saying?
Well, I think we must first of all concede that the president and the executive and the Kenya Kwanza administration has the right to implement what they promised the people. But usually the sequence is, when you have a manifesto, it must be translated into programs that, first of all, are bought again by the people through thorough public participation. That's number one. Number two, you then look for money through parliament. Number three, of course, you plan how you are going to execute, and you plan how you are going to procure, so that continuum has to be done in the way in which the Constitution and the laws say. The moment you do that, then you're home and you're
safe.
You're safe. You're safe. So the problem is when those steps are skipped. So that if anybody goes to court, then it means that you will not achieve what you must achieve as fast as you should. So I don't think it's a question of some people being so trigger happy to shoot the president's programs. It is really with these new people that he has appointed, because it's not the president who gets the programs on the ground as such. He has the vision, he has the idea, but then these cabinet secretaries, these principal secretaries, and so on, have to help him. And unfortunately, some of them are new in the game. They may not have immediately the kind of experience that is required to execute as fast as possible. So, and I even think that the Chief Justice told the President, why don't we have, a dialogue? And that was gracious, offline, so that we can explain these cases which have come before the judiciary. What are the things that we have noticed were not done correctly, so that they can be remedied, so that we are within the four corners of the Constitution and of law. And I think that even like the former president, the service delivery unit.
Yes.
So even in this instance, I'm sure there is a service delivery unit. We should really help the traditional cabinet secretary and the principal secretary and so on. And therefore, it's our wish, myself as a citizen, it's our wish that these programs are really implemented as quickly as possible throughout the country, so that we begin to see what the Kenya Kwanza administration is offering to us.
Before we go to a break, Prof, 10 years as a governor, right? Even before that, you are serving in the executive of the national government. This constitution and what it puts in place as, following due process. Following due process translates to take time.
Yes.
Citizens are not patient. So how do you balance between that? I mean, you promised Huduma, not Huduma, you promised a hustler fund, you promised houses, you promised jobs, you promised this and the other. And then all those things requires you public participation, policy, legislation, go to parliament, come out of parliament, go into budget, put it in budget, and then start rolling out a program. Boss, that's 3 years.
Well, from my experience, working in Kibaki's government, working in Makueni, even by the time you have a manifesto, before even the elections, you begin to think about how am I going to implement. So that when you win, then it's not like you're beginning at that particular point in terms of saying what is it that we need to do.
Continuing.
Precisely. So, and then, of course, sometimes in the first year of a government, there are problems because people are beginning to learn the ropes. But of course, our president has been a minister for for a long time, both in Moi government and in Kibaki government, and deputy president for 10 years. So he's not a newcomer. And so, yes, the people want services quickly. And maybe there are some low-hanging fruits which you can start with. But when it comes to complicated projects, if you rush them, if you don't follow due process, if you don't follow the procedures, that is when we begin to have now incidents of corruption. And you'll remember, like all these big projects, like the dams and so on, which were done maybe hastily. At the end, even when you have procured and you have done all those things very hastily, you don't deliver. So this is why sometimes people say the law is an ass, because it really requires you to do things correctly. But again, it's how you strategize and how you really plan what you want to do so that you can do it as fast as possible. And after you begin one project, the easier ones first, then you do the harder ones, and people see delivery of something and so on. And of course, again, the truth of the matter is there isn't also a lot of money in the country even to do those projects, because if we are paying 70% debt and 30%, now everything else, that is development and paying salaries and taking money to the county governments and all that, it also means that there might not be that much money to do as many things as you had promised.
KIVUTHA KIBWANA is our guest this morning. He's a former governor of Makueni County. He had served as advisor to President Mwai Kibaki. He had served in the Mwai Kibaki government also as an assistant minister. I remember you were in Gambut at some point. In environment.
And also as Minister of Environment and Minister
of Lands.
For 17 months, two ministries together.
Yeah. Anyway. He's also an academic. He's our guest. We are talking about understanding the Constitution and what the Constitution says about those three arms of government. They are separate, yes, but how do they work together? Siti?
You know, I am glad that even as we're going into the break, we talked about the time when, Prof, you were a minister. Now, what I'm looking at is some of the reasons we give for certain things not happening in a certain way. When you come into a ministry, you find a fully functioning ministry, even if you're a minister. Before you, after you, it functions.
Yes.
There are people who ensure these things function.
Yes.
The PS may not be there, but the people below, who work below, they very rarely get changed. And they know, they're like the worker bees. They know exactly what happens, where and how. I'm taking this line for a simple reason. When we try to explain why it is certain things don't happen in a certain way, say for instance within a ministry or government, it more or less suggests that government doesn't have a continuum, and government does have a continuum. There's institutional memory, and there are people who actually know this. So if something is wrong, is it the system or is it the person who is then the president and his decision-making process that is faulty? Because I don't think it's for lack of sufficient advice or knowledge on how things ought to be done. Because if that knowledge was lacking, then the ministries wouldn't function. And they do function.
Yes, it's true that in countries which succeed, they really prioritize the public service. They really want a first-class public service which is well remunerated, so that it can commit to public work. and it's very professional, continuous training, and all that kind of stuff. And even the example I cited earlier of Singapore, they decided that they were going to pay them as they pay as people in the private sector are paid, so that they have no reason to say that I have to do some other thing. And to a large extent, they even said, if you are in the public service, you can't do private sector work.
Yes.
You have to concentrate on this, take a break until you're out of the public service, make a choice. So in our instance, I can say for real that the public service, the ordinary public service like directors and below, those are in the national government. Actually, it is probably one of the most professional public services on the continent. I would like to say that.
Well trained.
Well trained. And even Kenya School of Government is a premier institution of training public servants.
Yes.
Now, leadership is so critical.
Yes.
Leadership from the minister, leadership from the permanent secretary, from now those are people within a ministry. So when they come in, usually you should first of all be told what is happening in the ministry. Who is who? What do they do? And you should now, in terms of now the budget that you have, they help you to do the nitty-gritty of the programs. So a problem now arises if there is both the leadership of the ministry as well as the public servants below, directors and so on, if they are not in sync. If somebody feels that I'm very minister or I'm very public principal secretary, these guys say, okay, we'll give our time, so that they'll realize that if there's that harmonious, relationship, then things will go faster. So, without necessarily being very critical of the president's decisions in terms of appointing his ministers and his principal, secretaries and some people who are in the very important commissions. If you appoint people who don't have a lot of experience, and then they come in and they do not understand this system of the public service, then initially you will have some problems. And maybe you'll reach a point when you rethink and try to rectify that, or, God willing, the people you have appointed will mature and will know the ropes, and then they will deliver.
That brings us to a conversation that we're having in 2022 during the nominations of PSs and CSs. And some of the deep debates that we're having here were, should principal secretaries not rise from the public service?
Actually, when principal secretaries rise from the public service, that helps you tremendously, because this is somebody who, from the word go, is going to help you implement your program. And of course, there is the mixture, because some will come from the private sector, from academia, from the NGO sector and so on. But on the whole, if many of them come from the public service, then you even give confidence to that public service. And they, as they work, their colleagues, who they were working with, are freer with them, and they'll be able to tell them that, this is what, requires to be done. Because, as I said earlier, the public service should be able to carry a country, even if there is a problem in the political class, like in America during Trump. The public service is so entrenched and experienced that even with faltering leadership within the executive, still the country moves on. And that is how it should be in, democratic spaces.
So how did we end up with this thing in our constitution?
How did we end up?
With this provision in our constitution, where the president is then able to appoint principal secretaries from outside the public service. Was it lack of foresight? Was it an oversight by the drafters of our constitution?
The initial thing was that he can appoint or she can appoint from the cabinet secretaries from outside. It was felt that since we had adopted a presidential system, then the ministers or the cabinet secretaries come outside parliament.
Yeah.
So that was the rationale. But for principal secretaries, they can be actually they can be sourced from
within the ranks of the public service.
Ranks, yes, and file of the public service. But the idea of the ministers was that since it's a presidential system, they cannot be in parliament, and they even there was an innovation for them to start coming to parliament to answer questions, and it hasn't quite worked well because it's supposed to be now through committees, not parliament directly. So that is constitutional structure. If one day we were to change our country and go back to a parliamentary system or an hybrid of a parliamentary system, and that is a massive change, which would require, big referendum and big national conversation. Then we could have ministers appointed from MPs and from senators and all that kind of stuff. But the idea of the 2010 constitution was that if you're an MP, you have a lot of work. Concentrate on that. So that you can't be a minister at the same time. That was the idea. That was our idea. But we have to evaluate how well it has worked.
Where we are. There's also something else that's been bothering me, and looking at our presidents and the kind of advice that they're getting, which ends up in the courts, and the courts sort of reversing some of the decisions that have been taken by the executive. But you have to ask yourself, the chief advisor, legal advisor to the president is the Attorney General. And if you look at our attorneys general over the last years, they've been seasoned jurists. Is it that the seasoned jurists are actually giving sound advice to their boss, but then the boss has to put in other considerations and they don't go with the sound advice that they're getting? Or is it that the jurists are actually giving the president unsound advice? If you look at the former president and the very many decisions that went against the executive in the courts, if you look at this president and already the decisions that are going against the executive in this court, you'd ask yourself, but some of these things are so basic. Who advised the president?
Well, you didn't talk about Kibaki, and I'm happy you didn't, because
you are the legal advisor.
Not really. I was not the legal advisor. I was
you were in the kitchen.
You were a political advisor.
I was kind of in the kitchen, invisible many times. The Attorney General is the chief legal advisor to the president.
Is it president or government?
To the government, including even county governments, because he can even go to court on behalf of county governments. So in legal matters, he will advise appropriately. But the president has also many other advisors, security, economics, and all that kind of stuff. So, and of course, the cabinet secretary is the principal advisor of the president in relation to that docket. And so, advice is always a tricky thing, because one, it has to be correct advice. It has to be proper advice. It has to be reasonable advice, professional, and all that. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is, do you accept to be advised? Do you take the advice? Like if I can go back a little to Kibaki, and it's not because we worked closely, but he would seek advice, and he would actually do that a lot. And I remember Ambassador Mudaura, he would on major things. He would call people and they would discuss for a long time. There would be PowerPoints and he would question, even before things go to cabinet. He would question and one thing about him, maybe, he was an old guy, was he didn't feel that anybody was above him, and these were kids and his kids, and they were younger, and they are good. He was Makerere, London School of Economics, so like President Ruto, PhD. He didn't have PhD, but President Ruto has PhD, so he didn't feel that he can't interact with ideas. Okay. So you put them on the table, interacts with them, and he says, yes, this makes sense. So I think all this advice that is coming through, must be processed. And I think when it is processed by the executive, by people in government, then it becomes useful. If it is not processed, if it's not sound advice, and if it is not processed, if it's sound advice and it's not processed. But I think still one has to say that the president has been president for a year and a little, and before he wasn't. And usually when government are starting, there are hiccups. And one, hopes that these hiccups are going to subside within this year.
Okay. So as with everything, when you see signs, you'll see signs of something and they'll tell you, if you see the sign, that means that something is coming. You see dark clouds, it's going to rain. If you see, other things, okay, well, something might happen. You've talked and put, there are very many pieces. Could it come together in how you then say that things are actually going in the country today? Whether we're talking about what's happening with the utterances made about the judiciary, whether we're talking about what's happening with public service, put those pieces together from the mouth of a man who, when he was at the county government, things were not going so well. And what did you say? You said, okay, well, let's collapse this house of cards and start from the beginning. Went back for re-election. People decided, well, okay, let's give it back to you. But you said, okay, things are not going well. Let's split the whole thing. Take that kind of perspective and tell us what you see with all these different pieces, whether they be signs or anything. How would you say that the country is performing at the moment?
Kenya is a complicated country. Our politics also are quite complicated. Kenya is not one of those countries where the leader can do whatever he likes and nobody will, say much. They will wait and they will be happy, that the leader is telling them everything. Kenya has grown to the extent that one must appreciate that it will be collective government. And I think that's one of the most important things to realize as leadership, that you work towards developing consensus all the time. And therefore, like in the Makueni case, I think it was a radical decision because what the county assembly was asking then meant that we couldn't actually have a government. Because if they ask for a quarter of the budget and there are 100, the MCAs and the workers, and the rest of the people are about 1 million, then it can't work. And they were insisting. So I said, there will be no government, and I don't want to run a sham government. But I think in our situation now, I cannot say that, things have gotten out of hand to the extent that they can't be remedied. And as I said earlier, I appreciate that this is first year going to second year of the government. However, I think, and I say this in a lot of respect to the president, because that is always necessary. It is time to breathe in and breathe out, and take a moment, off a bit, and then ask. Sometimes you go on a retreat. Maybe with a few people, maybe, and then you ask, what is it that is happening and what is not happening and what aren't we getting right? And to converse with the opposition, to converse with the judiciary, because with also the county governments, so that you can pause a deterioration of things. And even to explain certain things, like if it's some of the taxes, are they, like the housing levy, for example, is it really to build houses for hustlers, or is it to make money available to pay debts? You know, so that you tell people, the reality is, country people, we are in a big hole. Ghana has defaulted, Zambia has defaulted, Ethiopia has defaulted, and we are on the brink. So, like in Korea, actually, I think in the 50s or so, they had debt. And there, the people were told clearly, we have debt and we have to pay this debt. And people began to contribute money to pay the debt. Even women would take their jewelry and give it to government, so that government could pay the debt. There was that patriotism. And I think the president, like when he was campaigning, as I said in a particular piece, he was very persuasive. And he said, the people who don't have, I'm your guy, and we are going to do great things. So he needs to come back, to that person he was. And I would imagine person he is. So that actually, I was reflecting in terms of countries also need a father or mother figure. Kenyatta, at beginning of independence, he was such a father figure. But as he went on, I think sometimes in the university we used to call him Kamaliza, which was not a very good thing to call an old man. But he was a father figure. Moi, before the coup, came out as a father figure. I think Kibaki was kind of consistently a father figure, although he didn't talk much. But you felt that I'm secure. Many decisions which are taken are the decisions of a father figure. Let me jump Uhuru Kenyatta. Ruto, when he was campaigning, we were seeing a father figure. When he was campaigning, somebody who will, kind of take care of the business of everybody. Now, when he says things that are dramatically in contradiction to his promises, then now people say, well, is this still our father figure? And I'm saying this to say that he needs to realize that even at 57, 58 or so, is a father figure of a country. And a country depends on him. It depends on him in a positive way, not the father who beats people and abuses people and all that. Uhuru was like the friend of the young people. So he, he
was a younger uncle.
Uncle, and is it when they go a little dancing and so on, he can dance, he's happy, he's so on and so forth. That's another type of politics. I didn't jump him.
Cleverly come back to it. Prof, thank you very much for joining us today, and we hope to have you again many more times this year. What are you up to nowadays? Where are you spending your time?
Nowadays, I take it easy. Like when you invite me, I come. I like to work with young people, like mentoring young people, playing with my grandchildren. I like that also, and also thinking through writing and research what can get our country, Africa, to go to the next stage, including even the counties that we did in devolution, that we didn't talk about, because even there is separation of powers. The executive and the county assembly, even there, they must understand that so that we can progress devolution. But I'm very happy to be in this space. It's a hot seat, and I haven't sweated a lot. We
are three young people. Come and spend more time with us. Professor KIVUTHA KIBWANA has been our guest. Keep it here for more conversations.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.